Well, this week, DC Universe Infinite, the Ultra tier, is giving us a nice look at the past, a fresh look at the past that I really appreciate. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan, and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything I talk about. This is your first and only warning that many spoilers lie ahead. Right now, we're taking a look at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on September 25th, originally published on, August 28th. I think there was one here, Batman, The Long Halloween, The Last Halloween #1 was published on the 25th also to the Ultra tier, maybe to the Standard tier too, I'm not sure. Anyway, I don't have as many philosophical things to kind of dive into, and not actually a lot of in-depth comments. These were just a lot of issues that I enjoyed, not that I was blown away by, but, and I'm only going to talk about 4. I actually read a lot more than that. There was a lot of good stuff coming from DC this week. But yeah, The Last Halloween #1 was certainly enjoyable, and in some surprising ways. One way that was surprising was the art, because while Jeff Loeb, who wrote the other Long Halloween books, is also writing this one, Tim Sale passed away, and I believe it was 2022, and his art was just such a defining characteristic of these Long Halloween books and spin-offs that I was wondering, is it going to feel the same? And they're bringing on a different artist for each book in this series, and said out front in an interview that they're not planning on trying to replicate his art, but they are going to use the same character designs. And I'm like, well, I'm wondering what that's going to look like. And at least with this first issue, it turns out very well for me. And I think it's helped not just by the fact that they use the same character designs, but also some inking philosophy. I don't know who is doing the inking, but there's a lot of black, a lot of shadow that is overtaking a number of panels. And that was also something that was very true of the original Tim Sale work in these books. And also, there will be some details on the edges of like people and their clothes and stuff, but like right in there's plenty of smooth open space where there's no detail. It's kind of an interesting blend, because normally I don't like a lack of detail and an overly simplistic art style. And in some ways, you would think that, well, I shouldn't really like Tim Sale's work then, because he doesn't do a lot of like pencil lines for, little shadows and creases and wrinkles and hairs and pimples and all that kind of stuff. There is kind of a simplicity to his art, but at the same time, there's enough detail on the edges that at least I think that's how I would describe it. I don't know. I'm not very good at evaluating and critiquing art. It's not usually something that I focus in on, but for what it's worth, coming from a guy like me who's not really good at articulating thoughts on art, I feel like the art of this issue, although penciled by someone else and not necessarily trying to mimic Tim Sale, combined with the inks and the coloring, it really does feel fitting. It doesn't feel like Tim Sale necessarily, but it feels very fitting to the Long Halloween book. So very happy with that so far, and hopefully that kind of vibe will continue even as we change, artists with each book going forward in this series. Something else that I hope continues in this series is a focus on the pseudo father-son relationship between Batman and Robin, who at this time would be Dick Grayson. And I could be wrong, but I think this is the first of these Long Halloween stories that has Robin in it. And this is supposed to be, I think, like kind of his first year-ish of having Robin out on the streets fighting crime with him. And so Batman has some internal monologuing just about the nature of this partner and how he's different and more daring and reckless and takes risks and stuff that he would rather that he not take. And so there's some of that protective father vibe going on that I'm appreciating. And it's neat to see these first early stages of Batman stepping into a role that's anything like a father. And of course, Dick Grayson ended up being the prototype of many who came over the years who were Robin, including his biological son, Damian Wayne. that he also kind of became a father to, either just in some way loosely or actually by adoption or something like that. So it's neat that they're already kind of leaning into that here. And the reason I think that maybe there's a theme going on is because Commissioner Jim Gordon's son is kidnapped. And he's talking to Batman about it and is just shattered, distraught. There's just some heavy, weighty stakes going on. And they even acknowledge the fact that this is the same child who was briefly kidnapped in Frank Miller's story, Batman Year One. And he was only kidnapped, I think, for it was a short period of time. But the fact that they're calling back to that, and that story also dealt with the, was it the Maroni or the Falcone crime family? Well, it was dealing with crime families rather than supervillains and stuff. And these Long Halloween books are in many ways about the transition from the crime families being the biggest threat to Gotham to these sort of colorful supervillains, psychotic people with costumes and code names and stuff becoming the big threats of Gotham. And so I appreciate that there's a callback to that, but then also that they're, by endangering his son again, creating an opportunity for this father-son drama to play out, for a father to be concerned for his son, and for us to see that kind of fatherly concern for a son from two different angles, from both Batman's perspective and now from Jim Gordon's perspective. So I don't know how much of this, these issues aren't resolved and taken care of. It's just kind of a tension that's presented that makes me think that it'll be a theme going through this series. And I hope that's the case, because there's always really some good drama and some weighty stakes that can come from those kinds of really timeless issues. Very little to say about The Flash number 12. I think we're getting to the end of this story arc, and honestly, hopefully the end of this run by this creative team, maybe the writer in particular. It's just getting a little, as I've said before, the language is too metaphorical as they're getting into crazy Speed Force-y stuff and the nature of the fabric of the universe and stuff. It's like every other word is some kind of metaphor that, like, trying to decipher what is actually meant is impossible. And I think that is one route you can go when you're dealing with these sci-fi concepts that we don't have scientific understanding of yet. And we're building upon strands that go further and further out from known science. And so what are you going to do at that point? You have to figure out a way to talk about it. But at some point, it's just like a bunch of gobbledygook, and I'm just not interested. I don't have a sense of stakes. I don't have a sense of even what's going on and why I should care, So, but there are indications dramatically that we are coming to a point here where things are going to be resolved. I was hoping they'd be resolved in issue number 12, just kind of round out the first year of this new Flash book. But it's unresolved. Hopefully things will get resolved next time. But the cover says Flash Family Reunited, and in fact, these characters all do play a valuable role in the Wally's life, and as he's kind of like racing his way through this issue and trying to, catch the MacGuffin or solve the big bad or whatever the crap it is that's supposed to be going on. Especially when there's a month in between reading these issues, I'm like, oh yeah, so what was the gobbledygook from last month, and how does that factor into the gobbledygook of this month? And it's like, I don't want to go back and read those. So, but, I appreciate that at least at this point, there is weight and importance given to the supporting cast, the Flash family, as they say on the cover. So hopefully something significant is about to happen that will close off this big threat and get us down to earth again a little bit more, and remind me why I love not just the Flash, but why I love Wally West, why I love Linda West, Iris Allen, Barry Allen, all these different characters, why I care about them, why I should care about them. So I'm hoping that we'll get back to that real soon. Maybe the standout to me just personally as a fan this week was 0 Hour 30th Anniversary Special number 1, which is an original story. And it's not merely a story that takes place back during the events of Zero Hour, but rather a story that takes place today that has major connections to what was going on in Zero Hour. So I have made an Essential Issues video on the crossover for Zero Hour, so you can find that on my channel and get kind of a blow-by-blow of what that story is. And if you want, you can do that and then come back and continue listening to me here. So I'm just going to assume you're familiar with it. But anyway, what apparently happened, we learned, at some point in Zero Hour was that Parallax, before being defeated, created a splinter version of himself and a splinter universe, a splinter pocket universe that was in many ways basically a copy of the then existing one. And it kind of major events kind of resolved in different ways, starting from about that same point. Namely, Superman remained dead, and so basically Supergirl, or I think we would rightly assume Matrix, May, the shape-shifting Supergirl of like the 90s, because Zero Hour took place in 95, I want to say, 95, 96. So she's the Supergirl of that time. And what else? Oh yeah, Batman, his back did not heal, so his back remained broken. And Wonder Woman, for whatever reason, is out of the picture, so Donna Troy is Wonder Woman now. So there's certain things that have changed, but a lot of characters are given panel time that haven't been front and center since about this time period. I'm talking about like Azrael and the Ray and Jack Knight, Starman. So if you're familiar with characters that like were big at that time or maybe launched as a result of the events of Zero Hour. I'm also thinking of Guy Gardner Warrior when he was able to like shapeshift his body into weapons and stuff. Those characters, like all the characters as they were around this time, that are really memorable as being of that time, they are back in one form or another. And with this being kind of like a split, before I get to the more of the story and kind of how it resolves, I just said moments ago, I don't really pay attention to art usually, but I noticed this time, both through the art itself and the names credited and attached to it, they specifically got artists who were really doing a lot of work around this time to do the pencils, the art in different parts of this book. And it's longer than a normal size book. I'm not sure how long it is, but I mean, there's room for Dan Jurgens and Daryl Banks. Is that the name? Anyway, like names I haven't thought of in a while in terms of art. Jurgens maybe more recently, but like some of these others, like, oh my gosh, this was the dude that was drawing Green Lantern back in the day, or was drawing this crossover, whatever, So, and I could tell even before seeing the credits, I was like, this totally looks like a book that just they forgot to publish back in '96. And it was a real treat as an old fogey that was enjoying comics during that time. In fact, that's when, right around the time, I first started buying comics almost regularly, but they really got on the map in my life right around the events of Zero Hour and after. So this was especially a treat for, I think, me and probably for other readers who jumped on board at a similar time in a more full way, or maybe for the first time. But yeah, as I was going to say, it would be easy to have an event like this that actually feels like a big crossover event. I mean, nothing short of all of the multiverse is at stake in this story. Yes, it starts out as being just about this little Splinterverse, which they gave it that name several times, which makes me think, are they trying to help us imprint a memory of Splinterverse? Or is there going to be a callback to the Splinterverse? I wouldn't put it past them. It seems to resolve at the end with the Splinterverse being destroyed, but really, Wave Rider and Kyle Rayner just get out of there before it is seemingly destroyed. Who knows in the milliseconds before everything went completely white, what might have happened. We didn't actually see for sure the very last moments. So, that there's always room for who knows what. And then on top of that, at the end of this story, once they get back to kind of like our universe, the Parallax entity emerges from an asteroid and is like, okay, and like at the very bottom of the page, let me jump to it here if you're watching the video. The Parallax entity emerges from an asteroid and says that he's been freed. And the text at the very bottom, teasing whatever might be next related to this, says only the beginning. Now, I'm trying to remember where we left off with the Parallax entity as far as like Green Lantern lore. was it killed? Was it destroyed? Or it must have been imprisoned in some way. He didn't say that they brought me back to life. The entity says, you've freed me. So, so it's nice to know that even though it may be unlikely that we'll see the Splinterverse again, that this story still matters. And reading it on its own, it does read like a giant crossover event, but with lots of the details missing that you would like, that they would normally flesh out a bunch over a 6-issue story being told as part of a big crossover. But it does have like that big scale kind of vibe to it. Of course, fixated mainly on the characters that are splinter versions of these mid-90s DC characters. So anyway, a treat for me as a fan of DC Comics going back to that time period. Oh my gosh, 30th anniversary. Yeah. So I'm 46, so that's about right. Dang it. Okay. Lastly, we've got Absolute Power Origins, number 2 of 3, getting into the backstory of Amanda Waller. And at this point, this is an interesting little snapshot of the past. This is after she has kind of gotten an in with the government enough to start mobilizing the very first iteration of Task Force X. But the difference this time around is that this mix of kind of like mostly villains or questionable characters at best are persuaded to join Task Force X, persuaded by her talk to them about how, hey, these superheroes are going to get out of hand, that maybe the world is welcoming them now, but it's only a matter of time before they are a problem. And you guys can be a part of Task Force X and fight for freedom of choice itself, which of course would appeal to either villains or those that are rogues compared to the normal superhero community. And so it's interesting as she is trying to use persuasion at this point to control them, when of course we know that's not what Amanda does. She finds leverage against people and threatens them, blackmails them. Whatever she has to do, she finds some kind of leverage against them, or puts a bomb in their neck and threatens to blow them up if they don't do exactly what she says. And this is the story that explains how she went from persuading people to be part of Task Force X to acquiring the means to force them to be a part of the Suicide Squad, as it's also known. And it was great. I mean, I really enjoyed just kind of like the discovery of that. And there is something mildly philosophically interesting to me about this issue when she is trying to persuade the villain Cyclotron, who has been captured. She is trying to appeal to him and say to him, listen, you're more than this villain that you became because of circumstances. She says, you're Clarence Sims, born into bad circumstances, never caught a break, did a stretch on an armed robbery charge. You were only trying to get some money to take care of your family. And then she mentions her husband. My husband tried to protect his family. So she's bringing up the idea that and I think rightly so, that circumstances can shape us in some ways, or can certainly tempt us in some ways to go down certain paths. They can make certain paths more appealing. Some people take that, I think, further than they should, and would say that those born into bad circumstances have no choice but to go down a criminal path. And, to make a broad statement like that right now, I understand, is too broad. There are so many different individual circumstances, and we need to look at each one on a case-by-case basis. But I think there can sometimes be a tendency for people to attribute too much to circumstances and remove a sense of responsibility from the individual. And, you're going to hear those that have certain political leanings lean toward one side or the other, toward like the idea that circumstances shape people beyond their control, and the other side may be saying that, like, no, the individual has all the choice and they are completely responsible. And it's a little more nuanced and complex than that, because, as I said, circumstances certainly can influence the types of decisions that we make. They certainly do. So that's a complex topic. But I mean, I think leaning too heavily one way or the other results in not really capturing the truth of just how the world works. So I guess what's interesting to me here is that there's just some complexity that's being allowed in some of these stories surrounding absolute power and Amanda Waller that I appreciate. Could it be more complex, more morally nuanced? Sure. But man, I'm a glass half full guy right now with what I'm seeing. And one example is here, where she's saying, it's not your fault, you didn't have any control over your circumstances. This is something that you're going to hear emphasized much more strongly from those that are left-leaning, as they're kind of looking at social issues and government policy and things like that. And popular entertainment, whether that's movies and TV or comic books and stuff like that, it tends to, just anecdotally speaking anyway, it tends to be populated more by those who are left-leaning. And so reading this, I'm like, okay, so we're getting a little bit of left-leaning messaging here, and this guy's going to be reformed or, whatever, because he's given the opportunity to be taken out of those negative circumstances that caused him to fall into this life of crime. But that expectation, if that's where things seem to be going, is subverted when later on, Cyclotron, while the Task Force X is out in the field, is starting a coup. And he's like, we don't have to be anyone's puppets. We can be divine wrath. We can choose our own destiny. All this kind of stuff, totally going against the idea of following Amanda Waller's orders. And she is not going to have anything to do with this. And I think it's maybe in this moment, or maybe it's not just this moment, but this brings out to me that Amanda Waller, I don't think, can be so simply categorized as a writing device representing right-leaning politics or left-leaning politics. She is just Amanda Waller, and she's doing her own thing for her own reasons. Now, when she was talking to Cyclotron or Clarence or Terrence or whatever his name is, I can't remember, was she utilizing some language, some philosophical appealing that we would normally hear from left politically? Yes. But I mean, she's just willing to totally throw away any care or compassion for this guy who was supposedly caught up in his circumstances in the end here, when she gets in touch with Lobo while this little uprising is taking place. Lobo picks up on the other line. She says, I need you to kill Cyclotron. She's like, what? Why? She says, because I'll double your money. Speaking Lobo's language, right? He just lets out a chuckle and then just totally destroys this dude, and it nukes a fourth of this city or something that they're in. So Amanda Waller is not compassionately looking out for the little guy. She's not even really looking. I mean, she says it's all about trying to retain our sense of choice and freedom and control with this uprising of metahumans. Well, what about the choice of these folks to live? She's like, well, no, it doesn't matter at the moment. So I just appreciate that Amanda Waller can't be pinned down so easily in terms of what ideals she's trying to represent, or writers might be using her to try and represent. In fact, at the end of the day, Amanda Waller isn't really representing a political ideology. She's representing a human condition that when we experience tragedy and hurt, we can choose to react to that. We can allow ourselves to react to that by ourselves going down a dark, tragic path that brings pain into other people's lives. And that is what Amanda has chosen. With Amanda, it's not a political story, it's a personal story. At least the way she's being presented as of this absolute origin stuff and this just the backstory that's being presented here. I really appreciate this, because Amanda can kind of be all of us if we're not careful, and that's always worth considering. All right, ring selection this week. I'm going to go with the blue one. While I wasn't blown away, I enjoyed a number of books that came out this week, and they gave me reason to hope that I'll continue enjoying what comes next from each of these. So I hope that will be the case. But those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, love getting your thoughts and comments about the stuff I covered, or maybe something else that came from DC this week that I haven't talked about. You can leave all of those thoughts and reactions in the comments below. And then, as always, I hope you'll check out christiangeekcentral.com. We got a podcast there and tons of other content for you as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Hey guys, Peter Franson here. Want to play games to save lives? Then join me again this year for Game Save, our annual charity fundraising event in support of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, whose compassionate care and cutting-edge research has been saving the lives of children all over the world for decades. Joining the Game Save team only requires a willingness to ask friends and family to consider donating toward your fundraising efforts. Team members also usually do something fun and game-related to draw attention to their fundraising, like a special game night at your church or home, or like me, you can do a crazy 24-hour video game marathon. Now, I'm theming my fundraising around video games, but you can also use tabletop games if you want. What you do to raise funds is entirely up to you, but by joining the Game Save team, you can get support and encouragement from myself, from other team members, and have more attention drawn to your fundraising efforts. You can get more info about the origins and heart behind Game Save itself at gamesave.christiangeekcentral.com. To join the team, make an account at tiltify.com and then click on the team invite link below this video and join the Christian Geek Central team. After that, click on Teams, then the CGC Game Save 24 campaign box. Then on the bottom right, click Create Your Campaign. Follow the instructions to create your own personal campaign in support of the CGC Team campaign. To help your donors avoid confusion, I recommend using your name and the phrase CGC Game Save 24 as the name of your individual campaign. After that, as team leader beginning in October, I provide team members with weekly tips and resources to help make your fundraising as fun, easy, and effective as possible. October is going to be our main push for fundraising, capping things off with my annual 24-hour video gaming live stream on November 9th. Although you are welcome to have your events and continue fundraising until the end of November 30th, when our official final total will be tallied. If you have any questions before or after signing up, you can reach me anytime at paeter@spiritblade.com. I'm happy to help, and I hope you'll consider being a part of this with me. I can't wait to get started. Thanks. Bye.